is the last big chunk of class. It is. It's in you guys are my second semester teaching lecture, but my first run at the lab.
Oh, okay.
And so,
I don't know what's gonna happen.
yeah, I would do, although I've enjoyed the lab tremendously, I would run it and mark it a little differently than I have this semester. Because I don't like that the last day of class, all of a sudden, you know, in the last 2 class meetings, like 27% of your grade happens. It's just like, that's a stressful time to be doing a quarter of your grade between 2 things. I will post the answers to exam 2 this afternoon on Blackboard, and so you can check out. Lots of times I wrote on your exam, oh, this is what I was looking for, but if there's a multiple choice question that you want to check back with, you certainly can. There are different amounts of bonus for various little things that we've done in the last bit. I was going to invite you to go to next Tuesday, the freshwater past, present, future presentation that the university is doing as part of their sustainability efforts, but it happens right during class time. So you can decide if you want to come to class next Tuesday or if you want to go to the freshwater thing. I definitely invite you to come next Tuesday if you would like at 11. We have a guest speaker in my environmental studies class next Tuesday. It's a really fun guy presenting about the edge of Appalachia Preserve. And you're welcome to come at 11 and hear him talk as well as then come to class afterwards. Okay, do we have any logistics questions before we get into our topics today about predation?
Our intro is due on Friday.
Your introduction, I think I have due next Tuesday, the 19th.
Next Tuesday?
Yeah, it's not.
The 15th.
No, if you want to turn it in Friday, you can, but you can have the weekend to work on it. Definitely. Oh.
No.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about predators. If we have time today, I'll load up a couple of videos of predators. I realize it's one of the most dramatic things about and exciting things about ecology is when something catches and eats something else. And I've shown you pictures of that happening, but it's much more fun to watch the like pursuit. So I have a couple that I like that I'll try to fish out here if we have a moment near the end of class where you guys are working on the worksheet. Okay. But today we're going to talk about 4 main topics. The first one is this idea of functional responses of predators and prey. And again, this should be a linear relationship. The more prey, the more predators, the more predation. The fewer prey, the fewer predators, the less predation. But it's not always a straight line. And so, like the Ali effect, the interesting things that happen at either ends of the graph are interesting when it comes to ecology. They indicate then ways that predators and prey can coexist and to coexist. We then want to talk about what it takes to be an efficient predator. At the end of class on Thursday, we talked about harvesting rates of predators and like how many they could actually take and what would be the best prey population size to where they could continually eat a whole lot and how that applied to humans as predators, a variety of different types of resources. But today we want to think about it in terms of energetics and hunting types, predator types. And then we're going to talk about efficient prey. What are prey defenses? Like the little rabbit doesn't just sit there and like wave at the hawk and be like, hey, I'm here, come eat me. Okay, like that is not what happens. And so just like there are predator abilities in adaptations, there are prey adaptations. And these things are constantly working together in order to provide natural selective forces on both ends. And then finally, we want to end today by starting to think about communities, and that predators and prey form some of the basis of our food web interactions, which are the foundation of our communities. So we've talked about individuals and populations and species, and now we need to put that together in order to make communities and ecosystems as the last bit here of ecology that we'll talk about this semester. And so we'll talk about trophic cascades. How do we see indirect effects of predators on the community around them, not just on their prey items? Cool. Okay, so before we got into talking about maximum sustainable yield in our fishing activity on Thursday last week, we were talking about the two kind of effects that predators show in terms of prey items. And there was this functional response, and there was this numerical response. So the functional response is that the more predators and prey, the more functional predation there will be, the actual activity of predation. And we said that this should be linear, but that's not always what happens. So I'm going to talk about some of these instances when the functional response is different than our hypothesis that comes out of the lock level terror predictions. The other thing we said that happens for predators is that they have a numerical response to predation, and that the more they eat, then the more offspring they can produce, and so their population size increases. And that's not exactly what we're talking about today in terms of functional response, but it definitely plays a factor in some of these functional responses. Okay. All right, so the function of predators is not always linear. Okay, we can get these interesting graph shapes. The prey population size and the number of prey eaten does not always increase with the number of predators that you have. And there are lots of things that influence this. One of them is the fact of predation itself, that you have to spend time finding prey, and then you have to handle that prey and actually eat it. And depending upon your capture foraging time and your handling time, the amount of prey that you can eat, like you can reach a maximum. Okay, and that's what we see in the graph that we see here. That increasing prey population, we have these little phytoplankton being eaten by this little copepod. As the prey population increases, then the number eaten increases until you hit a point. Okay, and then all of a sudden it just stops getting bigger and it becomes this flat line. Okay, because a little copepod can only eat so many phytoplankton in a day, and eventually you'll hit that maximum ingestion rate between finding the prey and actually eating them and digesting them. And so even though the prey population is increasing, more of them are not being eaten per copepod because they're at their maximum handling rate. Okay, like they're full. This has consequences then for the interaction between predators and prey. Up until this point, the predators are controlling the prey population size, and then, like, they're just eating a constant amount. They're not really doing anything to the prey population. There are other things that happen as we're going to move through this curve, and it becomes a little, and we'll talk about these different spots here. Again, it starts to slow down when you can find prey easily, but it can take you the same amount of time to handle them. So even though you're finding prey easily, you still have to handle them and get them oriented just right to where you can shove them in your mouth. You still have to digest your food. And so even though you could be eating more, your actual predation rate starts to slow down. Similar things can happen, we'll see at the other end of the graph, where it can kind of level out, and that it can take you a really long time to find a prey item. And that means that you're going to be eating less, even though there can be a large number of prey out there. It's the idea of refuges. Is everybody with me?
How come the copepods, how come their population wouldn't be increasing?
Their population is.
Oh,
so we're
is.
just
They're
looking
just
at
only consume so
ingestion
much.
rate. Like
Okay.
they're gonna, as they eat more, their population will increase. And again, their overall impact on prey will increase as well. Their numerical response stays the same, but their functional response changes. That's a great question to highlight these two different things that I'm kind of talking about. Okay. All right, so functional responses. At high prey population densities and sizes, predators have these maximum points they hit. We see this leveling off of these predation rate graphs instead of this linear increase. Three things tend to happen. The predators become satiated. They're full. They're going to stop eating because they have already eaten everything that they can. And so even though there can be lots of prey, they don't need to. Okay? Slow metabolism of something like a Komodo dragon and a python are excellent examples of this. They only need to eat infrequently. The prey might be highly abundant and they aren't going to eat them because they don't need to. Their predation rate can be limited by their handling time. And that's what we saw with the little copepods, that it takes a minute to get it just right to be able to eat it. And that's going to eventually limit the maximum number of prey you can eat. If it takes you 20 minutes to eat a prey, you can only eat so many in a day. This often starts to affect organisms like our larger predators again, as well as the small guys. Again, in terms of a lion or a wolf, it can take you a long time to actually eat and consume a prey item. Okay, like it can take you days as a wolf pack to actually eat an elk. That limits the time that you're going to be hunting for another elk. It's that kind of a maximum amount of prey that you can take in a given period of time. All right, and that's what it does. It sets a maximum, it sets a threshold, it sets like a carrying capacity for predation. There's a maximum number of prey they can take based upon their handling time and their digestive system. That's good for prey, in that one of your prey defenses can be to have lots of high population sizes so that your predators become satiated and there's enough of you that some of you survive because there's so many of you. And that's the R life history pattern. The R life history pattern is that we're going to have so many of us that a bunch of us are going to get eaten, but a few of us are going to survive because the predators just can't eat all of us. There's too many. It's the many basket strategy. Someone will survive. All right. The other thing that can happen is that at low prey population densities, predators have to spend a lot of time searching. And that also sets kind of a minimum that they can actually consume. It means that there can be a lag between when predation really takes off and your prey population size. And so here we have clams per square meter, and they're being eaten by this crab. Again, as we get to really high populations of clams, you hit that maximum predation point, starts to level off for the crabs, how many they can actually handle and eat a given day. But at low prey population sizes, it also starts to level out instead of just heading straight for zero. This is because you get into this low capture efficiency phase when all the prey are hiding and you can't find them. It takes you a long time to forage and find a prey item before you can actually find one. When you have this type of incident, you often see that predators will switch prey search patterns. They'll switch to eating a more abundant prey. And as a result, your predation rate might be quite low, even though there's a fair number of you, because your predators aren't looking for you yet. And in this way, low abundance can protect you from predators because you have a greater chance of hiding, and there's a greater chance that your predators are not actively searching for you. It provides your prey population that time lag chance to really increase abundances for you as a prey population that then later will lead to high predation rates and increases numerically with predators. When a predator switch between prey, there's a time period when they're switching like what they're looking for. It's like pattern searching. And that this weekend, God bless my children, one of my kids decided he wanted to rebuild. We have thousands of Legos at my house. Like, I'm not joking. We probably have 5,000 Legos. And I love it. They build stuff that's incredible. It all came from kits and things they build and then deconstructed and rebuild into 1,000 different things. So God bless them. One of my sons this weekend decided he wanted to rebuild 2 of our more complex kits. And so I had to go through and help him find all the Legos. Okay? You're looking for a certain piece and you find it and then he's like, okay, I need another piece. It would take a minute before I would recognize what I'm actually looking for again. That's exactly what happens with predators at low prey population sizes. They're like, I'm hunting for hares, I'm hunting for hares. There are no hares. I need to look for voles. What does a vole look like? How do I hunt for voles? What do voles smell like? What are their birds? Where are they likely to live? It takes a lag of time for them to switch back and forth. That leads to lower predation rates at low prey populations than you anticipate. Okay. It also means for a predator that you're out looking for food longer at low prey population sizes, which means you yourself are more likely to get eaten. And because the predators now are getting eaten more often, they predate less. And so predation goes down. It's this interesting interaction that happens that again helps to establish refuges, that helps to set up the time lags that are necessary for prey and predators to coexist long term in ecosystems. It all comes from these kind of differences in functional responses than what we anticipate. There are a couple other fun things that tend to happen. I apologize, I've got my child's cold, so my voice is like, I don't have the like cough and sneeze runny nose yet, but I have. Last night I went to bed at 8:30, which is very early for me. My husband was like, "You are terribly sick." I'm like, I'm not talking. He's like, "How are you gonna lecture tomorrow?" I'm like, "Oh, may not sound great, but I'll be there." Okay, other fun things that happen in predator-prey dynamics. We're gonna talk about a bunch of these. There are refuges that can affect predation rates and prey populations as a result. The more cover you have, the more shelter you have for prey, it will affect predation rates. And again, once all the refuges are filled, then you have a prey abundance that some aren't hidden, and you will increase predation rates. And so at low prey populations, refuges protect and reduce predation. At high prey abundances, though, once all the refuges are filled, then predation will go up again on those individuals that don't have them. And again, you can think of it like territory, that if you have a territory that you're defending, you're fine. But if you're a floater and you don't have anywhere to go at night into a particular burrow, you're more likely to be eaten. All right. We also see that predators often have a preference for certain prey items. And this is particularly true of something as simple as a zooplankton copepod. They prefer to eat a certain prey item. It tastes better. Okay, like my kids prefer to eat fruit and chocolate more than they do chicken, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but like we do have to have some nutritional balance. In the real world, this affects predation rates. A predator may preferentially choose a particular type of prey item because it tastes better. Now, why it tastes better then becomes very interesting. Does it taste better? Do they prefer it because it's actually more nutritional? Because it has a higher calorie content? Those are the interesting questions then that come from these types of observations when predators have a prey preference. That can protect certain prey items and let them increase in population size, and it can then devastate the prey that are preferred to be eaten by predators. The presence of parasites and disease can affect predation rates. Let me see if I have something that's underneath this. Oh gosh, I actually. Sometimes predators prefer to eat the weak and the old, and they will take out the individuals that have a high parasite or disease load. Other times, predators actively avoid these organisms because they're like, they think they're like, that's gross. Maybe I'll get sick. Again, it tends to affect their preference for prey, but it can go either way. Sometimes, definitely in things like lions and wolves, it's more efficient for them to take the old and the weak, and so disease makes you more likely to be predated upon. And in other times, organisms that look sick are actively avoided. And this often happens in grazing. You have a blight or a disease of a certain type of plant, and the herbivores actively avoid it for whatever reason. Does it taste bad? They know it's nutritionally bad. They have learned that makes them sick when they eat diseased plants. All right. Interactions between prey and predators is definitely a natural selective force, and it is a factor for coevolution. And now we see that predators evolve ways to be more efficient and better predators to overcome prey defenses. And as predators get better, prey then change their behavior or their phenotypic traits in order to avoid predation. And it goes back and forth. And it can happen very quickly in certain populations, or it can be, a millennia-long battle between prey and predators as they evolve different defenses. Definitely this happens in bacteria and viruses. Viruses will be infective for a certain protein displayed by a bacteria. The bacteria evolve to no longer produce that protein. The viruses evolve to recognize a different surface protein on the bacteria. The same things happen in things like bat and certain types of insects. Bats define a new prey search item. The moths change their shape and size in order to avoid the bats. The bats develop more sophisticated ears and echolocation sonar mechanisms in order to find the new moths. And it goes back and forth over time. The other thing to keep in mind is that predation is not always lethal. And definitely this is the case in terms of parasites and parasitoids and herbivores. The Loco-Volterra equations and interactions between predators and prey are based upon lethal predators that consume their prey immediately, the true predation effects. But that's not always what happens. And so again, the interaction between predators and prey can be one and that's actually mutually beneficial. Definitely in terms of our grassland ecosystems, grazing and grazers are necessary in order to provide for regrowth of the grasses, to provide for nutrient replenishment of the soil in terms of their feces and decomposing bodies. They're interconnected in ways just beyond the actual feeding relationship. And then finally, we see that the type of foraging, which we'll talk about here next, can affect your predation rate, both in terms of the number of prey that you take, as well as your numerical response to the prey items that you actually eat and ingest. And in foraging, we're interested in the energy balance and the cost-benefit energy analysis of eating. And so we know that eating provides nutrients and eating provides energy. But for any organism, whatever kind of predator you are, you have to spend some energy to get that prey item. And so it has to be on the plus side for you energetically in order to eat that prey. Or else, why would you eat it? And that's always a trade-off. And again, certain prey items are going to be more nutritious, both calorie as well as nutrient-wise than other prey items. And predators are constantly shifting what that balance looks like, and as a result, what their preference or their search item looks like for certain prey items. Okay, so let's talk about foraging. And optimal foraging theory is something that we as humans that have such control over our diet, we don't think about too much any longer. Like for us, it's like, do I have time to go to the grocery store or wait in line at the fast food restaurant? I know I'm going to get food at the end. And so for us, optimal foraging theory is not something that affects our daily lives to the extent that it does for other types of predators. But optimal foraging theory says that animals harvest food efficiently, and in doing so, they select food sizes or locations that maximize food intake for the energy spent. They're going to get more out than they put in. And again, they have to do this, again, in terms of simple thermodynamics, and that there will be energy lost in this process in the transfer from food to predator. And so they need a big positive bonus for any eating and predation that takes place. This affects then predator choices in terms of prey items, and that subconsciously they are balancing this types of nutrition, energy, and prey items. Here we see a warbler, and we see prey sizes versus what they actually eat. And so at the top, this is a nice little bell curve of available prey items, so little insects that they could have eaten, but they only ate a subset of that. And in fact, they preferred prey that were in this like 7 millimeter size range. Okay, there are lots of questions about why. Maybe those are the most nutritious insects. Maybe they're the ones that they can find the most of the most easily. Maybe they're the ones that have the least handling time, so they can eat more with them as a result of low handling time. Whatever the reason, they have a preference for what's actually out there. And again, then this acts as a natural selective force. If you're 7 millimeters long, you're going to get eaten. And so this is probably going to be a disruptive selective force in this population to move them to either side away in terms of prey from being 7 millimeters. Okay. Types of things that go into optimal foraging for any given organism is nutrition, like what is actually out there versus what is most nutritious. And sometimes you can have preference, and sometimes you just have to eat what's available. Things that affect foraging is where to look. Is it safe or is it dangerous for me as a consumer to go out and eat this particular prey item? This definitely plays a factor in things like foraging for herbivores. If they go out into the field, they are more likely to be seen and predated upon by a hunter than if they eat in the forest. It's much more nutritious and efficient for them to eat in the cornfield, but they are more likely to be predated upon eating in the field than back in the forest. Also, is the place where I'm going to eat have high competition or not for that particular food item? And again, this can happen for both herbivores as well as for carnivores. How long is it going to take me to find an item? How do I find an item? Those things play into optimal foraging behavior. We can then start to define predators into certain categories based upon their type of foraging behavior. So we're going to see there are the pursuit predators that chase after prey. We have the lion weight ambush predators. We have the filter feeder predators that just kind of sit there. Okay. And all of these are a trade-off in that the more energy you put into catching prey, the bigger the payoff potentially. But if you miss, you put out a ton of energy for no payoff. Okay, so in any type of foraging, being an efficient predator, you want to balance the amount of time and energy spent finding and handling the prey versus the energy you get after you consume the prey. So again, we're lumping together the handling time and the search time, the capture time into this idea of foraging behavior. And so in pursuit predators, which are our lions, our wolves, our cheetahs, our big hawks, where they like swoop down and catch stuff and then they have to rip it and tear it apart. Our pursuit predators, they have a high energy cost. Okay, there's low search time. Their prey are often very abundant. They don't have to spend a lot of time finding a prey, but their handling time, the time it takes them to catch a prey and actually eat it, is quite long. And they have to put in a lot of energy in order to catch that prey. And again, in a hawk or a bat, they might have to fly and then swoop in very quickly. And so it's a high energy cost for pursuit hunters. But they tend to take big prey items. And so there's a big payoff if they're successful. We see lots of bear chases. We see lots of lion hunts. We see lots of wolf hunts that end in non-success. But it just takes one in order to feed the wolf pack for a couple days. Okay. In terms of wolves and lions, their prey are highly abundant. They're following vast herds of herbivores. There's lots of prey out there. They just have to manage to catch one. And so they're willing to chase after one because the payoff is really high when they get one. The lion and the wolf will eat less smaller prey, but they're also going to put in less energy in order to catch that. And they're going to prefer to eat the bigger prey when they're readily available and abundant. Hey guys, will look. This makes sense. Okay, pursuit hunters, low search time, but long pursuit, high energy cost as a result. They're not always successful, but there's a big payoff, and so it balances for them. And again, they're going to kind of choose the times when they are likely to be more successful, and that's all about learning. That's again why lots of these types of pursuit hunters spend time with their parents in a pack, in a pride, learning how to hunt, because they have to get good at it in order to be successful, in order to survive. Okay, stalking hunters are deliberate hunting with kind of a quick attack. This definitely bleeds into some of our pursuit hunters. These are the herons, that wait on the side of the lake, and then they're so still, and the fish or the frog comes up, and then they zoom, grab it. And again, that's the type of pursuit hunting when they're going out and catching something. But it's this mix of our ambush hunter and our pursuit hunter. Definitely classic big cat, where you're gonna Again, kind of lie in wait and then zoom out and try to catch a prey unawares. High energy cost, long search time as you wait for that right prey to come along, and then relatively quick pursuit in order to take it down. Again, infrequent success, but you get a high energy gain per prey item. And so there's a big energy investment with stalking predators in waiting for prey, in making sure you catch them, but then you're going to get a fairly nutritious, both nutrient as well as calorie-wise, payoff in the end. Many of you have a cat that like stalks stuff. I love those cat videos. I love internet cat videos in general, right? So, like the ones where like the cat is like stalking you, like one flip of the camera, it's like far away, and then it's closer, and then it's closer, and then it's like on you. All right, stalking predators. Stalking is that kind of mix, as I mentioned, between the pursuit and the ambush predator. And the ambush are these lie and wait predators. They tend to be our insects, like the spider that we see here, even the Venus flytrap predatory carnivorous plant that we have here is a lie and wait ambush predator. Frogs, snakes, lizards, these are organisms that tend to have lower metabolic rates, and they have then low energy cost, both in their kind of daily life as well as in their hunting style. They're going to put almost no energy into hunting and predation. They're just going to sit there and wait for the prey item to come. No pursuit or searching. Very low energy cost, but very low success rate. We talk about infrequent success with stalking and ambush predators. It's even lower success rate for our pursuit and stalking predators. It's even lower success rate for ambush predators. Because you're not doing anything active in order to bring prey to you. You have to wait for your prey item to bumble by you in order for you to be able to attack it. Moderate energy gain then per prey item, because you see prey so infrequently, and often your prey items tend to be small, and you're not terribly picky about what prey you get because you're just sitting there. You may get a really high calorie prey that lands on you in your net, in your web, or you might get a little tiny gnat that fumbles up your whole web. For ambush predators, the balance is that they're not going to get a lot of energy per prey item, but they're putting almost no energy into predation to begin with. And so it works out, still in the positive column. It's not the big gain that we saw with the other predators, but it's still a gain in the long run. Okay. The filter feeders that are out there in terms of predators are types of phytoplankton grazers that are setting up water currents, or sponges, corals, and sea anemones. We would classify them as our ambush predators, again, because they're just sitting there waiting for the prey item to come to them. It means that in order to get enough food and energy, lots of times they have to eat a lot, because each individual item is relatively low energy, low calorie. And as a result, then they can have a big numerical effect on prey items because they eat a lot of them. Okay, all right. Along with optimal foraging theory comes an understanding that for each organism there is an optimal diet. Again, that's going to provide for your energy and nutrition for you. And so not all food is created equal. For some organisms, it is. They don't really care what they eat. They're going to eat the first thing that they come upon. For others, they're going to spend a lot of time finding the best food. And those are two different ways, again, to go about predation. Are you just going to eat everything that comes, or are you going to find the best food item for you? So again, we're trying to balance energy spent and energy obtained. And for lots of organisms, the kind of balance or thought perspective is that, does it pay to expand my diet? Am I going to get more by learning how to eat and handle a new prey item? Am I going to get more by changing my gut microbiome so I can digest another type of plant? if I switch my prey image, am I actually going to benefit? Or am I going to eat more sticking with this one? And again, there are these two options. You can be a generalist where you eat everything. You have very little search time. Everything is acceptable to you, but some of the stuff you eat is not going to be great, either nutrition or calorie-wise. And as a result, then, it balances out. Some stuff you eat is great, some stuff you eat isn't. But in terms of where you can live and what you can eat, you can do really well. So a raccoon is a classic generalist organism. They can eat almost anything and live almost anywhere, including like in actual landfills, and be just fine. Some of the stuff they eat, is much higher quality than other stuff, but they can handle all of it, and so they do fine. The other example then, the other end of the spectrum is a specialist, where you spend a lot of time searching for the best food item, picking and choosing and being selective about what you eat. But by doing so, you get the best thing for you. And so you don't need to eat many of them. You can spend a lot of time searching and handling for prey items, because each one you actually catch is super good for you. Okay. I think I have some examples. I have some predictions. Okay. Together, optimal diet and optimal foraging theory make a couple predictions about like what you should be and like what your diet might look like given certain characteristics about you as a predator. And so we'll work through a couple of these. There are exceptions to all of these predictions, but they do allow us to make some hypotheses about organisms. So again, if you're interested in conserving a particular species, what their preferred diet is, what their type of food and prey handling time looks like, can help you then to build and maintain a food web that supports that predator like this. All right, prediction 1. If you have a short handling time compared to search time, be a generalist. Okay, so if once you find it, you can eat it right away, be a generalist. Okay, because then you're gonna find, every time you find something, you can eat it. If you find something and you can't eat it, well, then you spend a whole bunch of energy and time finding it, but you can't eat it. So be a generalist, be able to just eat everything. If it's gonna take you a long time to find it, but you can eat it very quickly. So you spend a long time finding it and it takes a little time to eat it, why not? Let's eat it. And so birds that have to spend a long time finding an individual insect, but then they eat every type of insect, are the classic generalist in this instance. And that it takes them a minute to find the little bug in your grass, but then they can eat every bug. They can eat earthworms. It takes them a minute to find a seed. And different seeds are going to be available at different times of the year, but they can eat all the different types of seeds. All right, short handling time compared to search time, be a generalist. It's going to take you a lot of time. Make sure you can eat it at the end. All right, prediction 2. If your handling time is long compared to search time, be a specialist. If it takes you a long time to eat the food after you got it, then make sure it's really worth it. Right? Lions have readily available prey, like there are wildebeest and zebras all the time. They can see them. They share the water hole with themselves. It doesn't take them a long time to find their prey. It takes them a lot of energy in pursuit and stalking in order to capture them. And then it takes them a long time to eat and consume them fully. So they want to be specialists. They're specializing on the old and the lame organisms that they're going to spend the least energy catching and have the highest success rate for. They're going to have a preference for certain types of food items that are highest calorie, highest nutrition. It's a lot easier for a lion to take a baby zebra than to take on an adult zebra that can kick them and potentially injure them. So be a specialist on the young, the weak, the old, that have a less chance of fighting back and injuring you at the same time you're trying to hunt them. Okay. Prediction 3 is that you tend to have a broader diet in an unproductive environment. If prey items are rare and you have a big seasonality to when food might be availability, be a generalist. Okay, be able to eat whatever is available in your ecosystem. More specialization becomes possible in productive and non-competitive ecosystems. Here we have ant nest beetles. I think these are different types of beetles that eat different types of ants on the island of Madagascar. And so here we have a really productive tropical rainforest-like ecosystem with a whole bunch of diversity of potential prey items. So these beetles can be super specialized on certain types of prey items because there's a whole bunch of them available. They can avoid competition by resource partition and niche specialization. This is really different than in other areas where there's one type of ant, and so you better be able to eat it. Definitely we see again in kind of our unproductive ecosystems in the desert in terms of productivity, many more generalists rather than specialists. They may have a particular preferred prey item that's more nutritious, but they'll eat anything that they come upon. And again, we see this in the desert foxes. They may prefer to eat the larger insects and the lizards, but they'll eat the little tiny things too. Definitely in the tropical rainforest where you have high productivity and biodiversity, a lot more specialization between predators and prey items rather than in less productive ecosystems. Again, the deserts, the tundras, the taigas, where you see more special, where you see more generalist, broader diet regimes. Cool. Okay, that was it. Optimal diet, optimal foraging theory. Hopefully you recognize that coevolution takes place here between predators and prey items all the time. We're going to get into prey defenses next. That happens here. The prey that most effectively escape predators win, right? They go on to live. They go on to produce more offspring. This then tends toward prey that are more evasive, that are better adapted at hiding from or evading predators in whatever way they're going to do that. The more evasive the prey get, the more effective and efficient a predator needs to be. They have to overcome these defenses or they'll go hungry and they'll eventually go extinct. And so it becomes this feedback loop of interaction between prey and predators. And again, the predator can overcome a prey defense, and then the prey that can avoid that new predation strategy will survive and pass that trait onto their offspring, and the predator has then a selective force to evolve again. Predators that more effectively detect prey items will pass on those mechanisms. You'll get more efficient predators over time. And so we're evolving towards the best prey item that's the most evasive, at the same time that we're evolving towards the most effective predator the world has ever seen. Probably wasn't the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but of that kind of magnitude. And again, you can think about some of these species of predators that have been on the planet for a long period of time. These reptiles that we've had, the sharks, they have been essentially unchanged for millennia. They are extremely efficient predators, and they have lasted so long because they're so efficient. At the same time, they have a plethora of different types of prey items because they're really good at escaping predators, or else they would go extinct too. Right? Ways that we summarize this interaction between predators and prey are with terms like the endless arms race. The idea that at the same time that we're favoring the most efficient predators, we're favoring the most elusive prey, and they're constantly changing in response to each other. And in terms of an endless arms race, we tend to think of a prey item produces a toxic compound. The predator then develops an immunity to that toxicity. So the prey becomes even more toxic, and the predator then is able to disable that new compound that the prey produces. It's just like the United States and Russia were during the Cold War, where the United States was like, I have 10,000 new weapons, and Russia was like, that's fine, I have 15,000. And we were like, oh man, we got to make 25,000. It just continues to exacerbate certain traits or strategies within both prey and predators. And it's not like the prey and the predators can sit down at a peace conference and be like, hey, you can eat 5% of me every year if we can just quit out trying to put efforts into this. They don't have those types of conversations. All right. It also leads to interesting hypotheses like that of the red queen hypothesis, that the prey must constantly evolve new defenses in order just to stay put. Okay, it's like the red queen in oh good lord.
Alice in Wonderland.
Thank you. I was like, through the looking glass is Alice in Wonderland, the thing you'll actually recognize. Or it's like the red queen is like chasing after Alice, but she just kind of stays in one place the whole time. And that's the idea between this balance between predators and prey. It sets up this situation where as one evolves, so does the other. And you end up back where you started in terms of predation rates, prey population sizes, functional numerical responses to predators. Even though you can change over an evolutionary timescale, the interaction remains the same. Okay, let's talk about prey defenses. So turn to your neighbor. What are some ways that make a prey less likely to be eaten? What would make you a more evasive prey?
Shell.
Generally smaller, so they have less mass, so they can be closer. Camouflage.
Yeah, they see the stripes.
Okay, what
I
makes
don't
you
know.
a good prey? Like good at like surviving predation. Camouflage. Camouflage. Okay. Oh God, there'd be you in here somewhere. Yeah, there's a you, and I feel like I should
I think
write a
that's
word to
it.
be like you.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I can't spell them.
Another subset of camouflage is mimicry.
Good.
Display colors.
And again, this is gonna hard to mix a little bit.
What's like not really camouflage, but like burrowing and stuff? Does that count? What would that be called?
I would we can put it in some like behaviors.
Yeah, like escaping. Some to fly away. Like, I don't know, he's like a cat trying to get a bird.
Yeah, so like being faster and fleeing is one of these behavioral responses.
Shell.
Good. She can be hard. Oh gosh.
Or type action.
Did you have another one? Maybe?
No. You got toxic.
That pretty much covers it. Usually I tend to think of them in 4 categories, although we'll have some little details. One is that you
Like
are
grouping.
fast. What's that?
Like grouping.
Yeah, and that's gonna be one of our behavioral things. It's like being in a herd. Herd group gives you some defense.
Cool.
You can be fast, so run away so you don't be eaten, or have one of these other behavioral responses. Don't be found in the first place. Be camouflaged. Okay. If you are found, be distasteful. Be hard to eat. Make there be some injury or cost to eating meat. And along with that distasteful comes this toxicity. Like actually be like toxic, like you're gonna kill your predator, or make them sick so they'll quit eating you. And again, the idea is that in the case of hiding and fleeing, you yourself get protected as well as your whole population. The predator learns there's a bigger cost to finding you in search time or in handling time. There's a bigger energy expense. In the types of toxicity and the shells being hard, the predator, there's an individual cost, like you might get eaten, but then it will protect your population as a predator learns on an individual basis or gets killed in the case of meat. And so these two help you and your population. These two help your population, but they might not help you as an individual, as a predator is large enough. Cool. Nice. All right. So the first one is going to be these chemical defenses, this idea of being distasteful. You can release a bad odor so that it smells bad near you and it can drive off predators. Or when they eat you, they smell bad. And so then they have a harder time finding mates or interacting with others, or they attract predators of they themselves when they eat you. Different organisms release alarm pheromones. This happens in insects, it happens in plants, it happens in bacteria and things like phytoplankton and zooplankton. When a few of them start to be eaten or grazed upon, they release these aromatic chemicals then that warn the rest of the population, that can induce them to make either other types of toxic chemicals or that induce a behavioral response to predation. And some organisms are just flat out poisonous. They make things that are poisonous to their individual predators. So stink bugs, we know, are stinky when you crush them. And again, drives off predators from an area. Monarch butterflies are toxic to their bird predators, even though they're not toxic to lots of other organisms. This little fish is the Iowa darterfish that releases pheromones in the presence of its predators that alert the population in general then to have invasive behaviors that take place. It definitely happens in plants. And in plants, they make a whole suite of different types of compounds in order to deter herbivorous grazers of a lot of different types, whether it's insects or mammals that are feeding upon them. These things are secondary metabolites. They make them in very small quantities to deter predators, and they can make them in bigger quantities if they want to poison and inhibit digestion in grazers. So again, they can put different amounts of energy into making these different metabolites depending upon their level of predation at the time, what they think their risk is to a particular type of predator. In general, we think that plants produce these three classes of chemicals. You can be an alkaloid, you can be a terpenoid, or you can be a phenolic. And again, different chemical structure defines these three different chemical classes of a plant, chemical defenses against grazers. We have found a lot of uses for these things that plants make in order to drive off grazers. Okay, things like the alkaloids, these are the basis of drugs like morphine and nicotine and poisons like cyanide that have similar effects on people as they do on the grazers. Although I don't know of any like deer that have gotten a high off eating tobacco plants, but you know, that's these terpenoids, these are the latex compounds, oils, and resins that plants produce. They tend to be a little bit heavier and waxier in substance. We like to use those in terms of things like rubber. This is a plant compound that has real industrial uses. Some of these are our most favorite spices and fragrances that we use in making perfumes. These secondary byproducts of plants have found a new life in terms of human uses. And then the phenolics tend to be very aromatic compounds. It is just now about to be like make your Christmas wreath season, bring all these Christmas trees in your house. The tannins and lignans that are produced by evergreen trees are the smells that we associate with evergreen trees. And again, we find them to be attractive for the most part. They wouldn't deter us as a grazer, obviously. But if you ingest them, they have consequences. They're hard to break down and digest. They help protect them from herbivores. A ton of these secondary metabolites that we see as chemical defenses of plants are useful not only in these various industries, but then also in the medical industry. And that we have learned that some of these interesting compounds that plants make can be used to fight things like cancer or to drive off other bacterial or viral diseases in certain instances. And understanding what plants are producing is one of the major areas of biopharmaceuticals today, and trying to identify these metabolites and then see what they're good for humans. Whether, again, it's a nutritional supplement or it's something that can actually be used as a drug. And so here we have just simply one kind of base set of a chemical compound made by a variety of different plants in a similar array. Just like variations on this chemical structure give us everything from an anti-malarial drug to a couple different anti-cancer drugs, anti-hypertension, something that can be used to help fight nicotine addiction. Really interesting area of bioscience and biotechnology today. If you get really interested in botany, this is one area that you can go into where you can be highly successful and have some really interesting patent work and real applications of botany that happen today. It's cool. At the same time, some of these base compounds are poisons before we start to modify them into really helpful medicines too. And again, sometimes that's why they're helpful anti-cancer drugs is because they kill cells. Use them to kill certain cells. Okay. All right. The second class of prey defenses is your coloration. And there, again, are a couple different ways that you can take this coloration defense. The first one is cryptic coloration, which is camouflage. And I put it in my place. Cryptic coloration, you can match your surrounding, like the flounder that's on the seafloor here. It might be a halibut that's lying on the seafloor here. Or you can be object resemblance, like our walking stick, where you look like something else in your environment, in your actual limb structure, as well as your coloration technique. That enhances the search time for a predator, which means I might switch to a different prey item that's easier to find. We also see that animals use warning coloration in a couple different ways. One can be as an alarm signal, a flash coloration, where you alert your surrounding individuals to a predator. And that's the classic whitetail flash of the deer. We're going to talk about it again in terms of a behavioral response with a warning call. Small birds all respond to the warning calls of each other's different species when a hawk or a predatory crow is in the area. The last kind of use of coloration is what we talked about in display coloration, where you're going to advertise with real bright colors, kind of the opposite of camouflage, that like, hey, I'm toxic if you eat me. And so don't eat me because I'm toxic. Trust me that I'm toxic. And again, the warning coloration, sometimes it comes not only with being toxic, but also that you can inflict an injury to your predator. So we see this in things like bees and wasps, that bright yellow, black coloration and striping pattern to say, hey, I have a stinger, watch out for me. Okay, there will be a cost to you for trying to eat me. Did you leave something, Sandy?
You left a water bottle.
Oh.
I guess it's on.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So coloration, it can be elusive and help you to hide, or it can be to deter your predators, depending upon how you use it. Mimicry, then, is a form of this type of coloration, and sometimes it's camouflage, where you yourself are not toxic, but you're looking like a toxic species. And sometimes the mimicry is because you're all toxic, and you are enhancing each other's defense by looking like each other. So mimicry is fake it till you make it, and in Batesian mimicry, that's definitely what's happening. And in Batesian mimicry, you have a mimic that is non-toxic, like our scarlet king snake here, that is similar in coloration pattern to the poisonous, very poisonous coral snake. We see that in territories, geographic ranges where mimics overlap with each other, there is less predation upon both species than where they occur individually. And so they act as protection, both especially for the non-venomous individual, but then when they occur together, also for the venomous one too. Coral snakes are not a problem in our area, but they can be in places like Florida and Georgia and certain portions of Alabama. And so if you're traveling to those types of regions, just remember that yellow next to red is a problem. And that's the instance. Notice with the coral snake that the yellow is surrounded by black. So yellow and red together is really your like warning coloration.
I mean, it's saying,
So
Yeah.
it's like red next to black, you're okay, Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Yellow next to red,
You're,
Dead.
You're dead.
Yeah.
CL, you're a dead fella.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
that's it.
So poisonous, does that mean they get sick if they eat it? Because I know it's venomous too, then, right?
No, I would say in this instance, it's more that you're at risk of getting a poisonous bite.
Oh, okay.
And that for some individuals, that venom will be toxic and kill you, and for others, it's going to make a wound that could be really harmful to you. Get infected, could slow you down, make you less likely to be able to eat something else.
Oh, yeah, but it's not worth the hassle.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Malarian mimicry is when all the individuals that look like each other are toxic or have some cost to them. And Batesian mimicry tends to be more common, but then we have these examples of Mullerian mimicry where it happens too. Here we have two types of wasps that all have a stinger, or both have a stinger. They look very similar in their coloration and wing and eye morphology, limb morphology patterns. And then we also have this moth caterpillar that looks very similar to it, and that also has toxic. And so again, they occur together in the same environment. Predators that learn that one is a problem will then avoid all three. And they act as a natural selective force for all of them in order to look similar. It becomes a type of warning camouflage coloration at the same time. Cool. All right. The third class of prey defense is to be hard and sharp. You have some protective armor. You have a stinger. There's some cost to try to get at you. There's a higher risk of injury to your predator, and thus it acts as a predator deterrent. We see it in plants and things like thorns, which these are pretty intense thorns compared to what you find under normal roses. Here we see it in a porcupine fish. All these little prickers, when it inflates its swim bladder really quickly, and it becomes this ball of spines that are less likely to be eaten. Even if these organisms get ingested, they tend to stick in the throats of their predators and cause their predator to choke. And then when they deflate, they can just swim out of the dying predator mouth and they're okay. They don't actually get eaten in this stage. Makes you pretty cool. If you're going to be a pufferfish, be a pufferfish. Like, go all in if you're going to do it. The scorpion here has both claws that it can pinch you as well as eat stuff with, and it has this venomous tail barb. And again, in terms of the scorpion, this is part of it being a predator, is being able to kill and attack prey. And it also acts as defense against its own predators. So there's a real heavy selective force to have these types of defenses because it works on both ends of the spectrum, both in terms of getting you food and protecting you from big predators. Can you get some other examples of protective armor?
This just popped in my head. Can you scorpion that can like detach its own, or like a crab that can detach its own claw and be like, and then take it away?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Yep.
Like leave its tail.
That's another type of predator defense where you like sacrifice a body part in order to save the whole individual. And so we see that in some lizards that have detachable tails, like skinks, and lots of times they'll let a tail go and they can regrow a tail, no problem. Same thing with crabs in some instances. They can lose a limb and it's okay. Starfish can regrow as long as part of the central disc is there. And sea cucumbers, they can actually eviscerate themselves. They will spit out all their intestines and digestive organs and leave that for a predator to eat. And then they'll crawl away while the predator is eating that and they'll just regrow that stuff.
That's good.
Totally gross, but like, hey, did it die?
But did you die though?
I know, it's like, are you the same?
What about toucans? Is that like their mimicry too? With their
bright coloration? I don't think so.
I'll think more about imitating sounds in the jungle.
Yes, and I'd have to look to be sure. And that sometimes there are two uses of sound, right? Like one can be in order to sound like something else, to drive off a predator, like, hey, there's something here, that's your predator. Or to have long distance travel communication.
Oh, okay.
And so, lots of times it does both purposes. I'd have to look to check on the two things to be sure. Okay, the last class are behavioral defenses. Alarm calls, when individuals make a noise that says, hey, there's a predator here, that alerts everything in the area to the predator. So the chirping and alarm calls of our ground squirrels and our prairie dogs. The piercing, very particular alarm calls of birds that say, hey, you know, there is a wolverine in the area, everybody be on alert. Protects not only you as an individual, but then your population too. There's lots of distraction prey defenses. We talked about this, evisceration, leaving a limb behind, that definitely falls in this category. We know that in some cases, adults will act like a wounded individual in order to draw predators away from young defenseless organisms. We see it in wolves, that there's a bear that's approaching a wolf den. The adults will go in and try to distract the adult bear in order to draw them away from the den, while then other, you know, the last few members try to get the pups out and move them away from the bear's attention. Lots of these behavioral defenses are herd type defenses in groups of individuals, again, where they're going to protect preferentially young, weak, older individuals from predators. Definitely the movement and protection of young individuals inside a moving herd is something we see all the time as a predation defense. Definitely in the case here of our muskox, where they've got their horns out as they encircle the young individuals in the middle from a predator, help to defend against predators, both on an individual and then as a population type scale. Nesting behavior, where adults defend in young, either at the egg stage, the larval stage, the young adult stage. That's all predator behavioral defense. I don't know what predator I'm protecting my children from at this point, but that's why they stay with me for so long. Sometimes I wonder if they're still running stuff for me too, but they need my help finding pieces for Lego builds. Okay. One of the most interesting behavioral defenses is predation cessation. And again, it kind of goes back to this functional response that we were talking about at the beginning of class. This idea that if there are a lot of you, you will eventually fill up all of your predators. And then the rest of you can go on and survive. And so having high numerical numbers can be a very interesting behavioral defense for predators and prey items. Here we're going to see our live cicadas, and you know that cicadas emerge about the same time as each other every year. There's this huge increase in cicadas, and then they all start to get eaten. But the predators can only eat so many of them, and there will be some that survive. And so again, this idea of filling up your predators and making everyone full is one of the ways to overcome predation. And I'll try to start class on Thursday. I have one little thing I want you to do here at the end of class. I'll start class on Thursday. I have this great video of the cicada emergence that happens in our temperate deciduous forest. And then they have all these organisms that eat all of these cicadas. And then at the end of the video, all the predators are just like lying there, like full. And there's like cicadas hopping all over them. And they're just like,
Full.
Can't eat anymore. And you're like, oh, that totally worked in some weird, gross way. All right. One thing that I want you to think about here at the end of class, and again, you can talk to your neighbors, is an idea that we have in conservation biology today, which is predator reintroduction. And that in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, here in the United States, as well as in Europe and Asia, we really saw predators, natural predators, as the enemy. These were things that were eating and affecting our livestock herds, and they were eating natural herds of deer and caribou and moose that we wanted to hunt and eat. And so we had a campaign of predator removal, where we went in and we killed all the big predators on purpose because we didn't want to compete with them. And it totally worked, okay? Like, we killed all the major predators across wide swaths of North America, Europe, and Asia, most predominantly the wolves, as well as some of our big cats, the cougars, the leopards. Happened to a much lesser extent in Africa, where they just have a different relationship with their wildlands to begin with. And so in the 1800s, there were about 350,000 gray wolves, we think, in North America. By 1900, due to this predator extermination campaign, they were mostly extinct. And so we offered really big bounties if you would come in with a wolf pelt to your local land bureau of land management. They would pay you like $20 and like that's a pretty nice bounty in 1895. They would give you $20 for a wolf pelt. Like, you can make a living off that. In 1974, the North American gray wolf was listed as endangered, and in 1996, they returned 41 wolves back to Yellowstone National Park. And they have since then really reestablished themselves across the northwestern United States. There's about 104 wolves today in Yellowstone National Park, huge tourism industry in order to go and look at wolves. But there is a lot of conflict between wolf introduction and these predator reintroduction ideas and people who live in these ecosystems. The fact still remains that wolves and people come into conflict over pets. And then, like, they'll eat a little dog if it's there. They'll take livestock, especially lambs and young goats and calves. Again, that's what they predate best upon. Some people view them as dangerous to begin with, and they don't want them. And it's becoming an increasing problem that wolves in the Yellowstone region eat a ton of elk. And elk hunters now have trouble getting permits for elk as they have in the past because wolves have been such a great regulator of elk population sizes. And so there's this conflict about predator reintroduction. So what do you think? That's a good question.
What are the benefits of predator reintroduction?
Hmm.
Just like historical, like reintroduction? I mean, is it just because they think it's cool? Does it actually help benefit anything?
It does. And so the trophic interaction is pretty phenomenal in that without wolves, all these grazers went into overpopulation mode.
Oh, okay.
And so they have eaten a ton of the grassland and the native shrubs in these western ecosystems to the point that they're almost driving themselves to starvation. And so the reintroduction of the predators is an attempt to regulate grazer populations, first and foremost.
That makes sense. What do you mean by who are the stakeholders in introducing predators?
So a stakeholder is anyone who has a vested interest in the ecosystem.
Okay.
So something like a human perspective, like what types of humans, classes of humans, would be a stakeholder in wolf reintroduction.
Like conservationists and like farmers. I don't know if farmers is the right word.
Yeah, definitely. And also think like, who else?
Big game hunters?
Yeah.
Ecotourists. A lot of people
Ecotourists,
like
good.
other, like, people do not
I
have
guess you're right.
wolves, like how people don't have, we don't have pandas. I don't think that they have many gray wolves in Japan, so they probably think that's probably pretty.
So Yellowstone farmers, big game hunters, ecotourists, government maybe.
One of the really interesting things in wolf reintroduction here in the U.S. is that wolves are protected within the boundaries of Yellowstone National Park. You cannot hunt or trap or kill a wolf within the park boundaries. But it's not like the wolves know when they've crossed a boundary. And so we've had several prominent, like well-known tagged wolves that have been killed just on the outside boundaries of the park.
Just like staking it out or something.
So when it happens, it's been very interesting in that some cases it does look like retaliation, and that this was purposeful wolf hunting to make a point about wolf reintroduction. And in other instances, it's actually people that have been awarded wolf hunting permits by Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. And they had a legal right to hunt that wolf. And that we talk about wolves in Yellowstone and how their population has stabilized, but that's because of dispersal. And there are over 200 different wolf packs in the western United States now. And they interact with more people than just at Yellowstone. So what should be our new relationship to these wolves? How do we manage for both wolves and people?
That's the carrying capacity for Yellowstone, 150 wolves.
Yeah, I think
Seems kind
so.
of low.
It doesn't take much. Yellowstone is one of our largest national parks, but it's not the largest. And each wolf pack territory is relatively large.
Yeah.
And so we really think the carrying capacity is somewhere between 110 and 150. They were upwards of 200, 250 wolves in Yellowstone at one point, and they have dispersed out of that. Like that was too much.
Okay.
My friends that went to Yellowstone, some of the pictures we've been looking at this semester are photos that they took on their trip this last summer.